Smartphones.
Today's Wednesday, February 4th, 2026. Welcome back to Recoup. I'm Sweets. This is Sid. This is our midweek check-in where we talk about what we've been delivering and what we're going to deliver by this weekend. I'll kick it off. I'm working on sandboxes, and sandboxes now have, I've been focusing on the endpoints as well as the build. I'm going to try to keep this brief. On the doc side, you have these three endpoints, which are what I'm focused on. List sandboxes, which gives you the sandboxes. I think this will ultimately not be relevant and we can delete it. Create sandbox, which creates a new sandbox. This one is very important. And then update snapshot. Update snapshot gets called by the task to update after the task runs the state of the sandbox. Create sandbox right now requires a command to be passed in. The problem I'm finding with that is when I want to test my changes to the task, I am spinning up a sandbox that already has a command in it, and then it shuts itself down. And so then the sandbox is failing because the sandbox is already being shut down before I can inject my own commands into it. So what I'm going to do is make command optional. That way I'm able to spin up a sandbox but not do anything with it and not automatically shut it down. That decouples the creation process from the actual execution of tasks. I think I'm having trouble thinking through how any other dev would send commands in other than us internally for testing. So this might just be an internal case when we wouldn't want to pass in a command, but that's what I'm working through right now. I've deployed everything across the stack. So when you create a new sandbox, it should run the command, save the snapshot and everything. I guess I can demo that real quick. So let's demo it from right here. If you go inside of the docs, go to developers.recoupable.com. Can I demo this from the front end? I think I need to update the front end to work with the new parameters, so I'll test it from here. Get in my key. I don't think that key's correct, so I'll update it. And then I need a command. Right now, the command that I just use is a simple Claude code, permission mode, accept edits, model opus, and then just reply, hello world. Let's see if that works. I send it. We should get a response back pretty quick. We did. It says unauthorized. Let me take the API key I'm testing with over here. We get back a response. Now we can see our run ID. So I can take this run ID over to the production side of tasks. So you saw how fast we got back that response, just under 2 seconds. The sandbox was already created, but it did not execute the work. The reason we do that is so that way developers building on top of Recoup's API can get back that instant response. And you can see over here, it is still running that task. So we get back the instant response, but then Claude continues to work inside of the sandbox until it finishes. In this case, it took 25 seconds. So we ran the command of Claude with the permissions and reply hello. Command execution completed. This is what I'm trying to debug. Expect this to tell me more about the output. So that way, when I ask something like, what is the file system? When it replies, it actually tells me what the file system is that I just sent in. We then take a snapshot of the sandbox, the current state of the sandbox. Snapshot is created. We get that snapshot ID. Then we update the account snapshot. So each account has a snapshot. Same principle as our connections. Right now I'm thinking of these accounts as human level accounts, but if we want an artist sandbox or an org sandbox, an account exists for both an artist and an org or any other workspace. So if we want to spin up sandboxes and snapshots for those other entity levels, we can. We then update it inside of Supabase, that link, and then we complete. So we can see over here inside of Supabase, there's only one account. Well, there's now 2 account snapshots. This one is the latest, and this is something I'm still thinking through. It looks like this is probably an org ID. Let me verify that snapshot should be DSV ending with CAQ. This one is did I read that wrong? DSV ending with CAQ. DSV ending with CAQ. So this snapshot has now been updated. Whenever this account comes back in and executes another query, another command, it's going to spin up the sandbox right from where it left off with the same file systems, the same state of the machine, and everything else. Next step is figuring out how to actually get the output from this so that I can show the file system on the front end. Question in my head is, should I update this account snapshots table with a column for file system? Right now, if we need the file tree, we have to hit a button, spin up a sandbox, run the command, and then we check the latest trigger, and the trigger dev is where it's being stored, but it's not inside of Supabase. So I'm thinking we store the file tree string inside of the snapshot, because with the snapshot comes the file tree, and I think both of those are important. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm cool with it.
Okay, that's it for me. I'm trying to get all these dots connected. It's in progress, but we're spinning up sandboxes, and the biggest change from Monday is we now have snapshots that are being used.
Yeah, awesome. On the right path. I love what you said in your thing about ideally like have an email thread with the customer and us and Recoup. And like the goal is to test from email, not from testing from the web interface, right? Like we win if it works like that. I mean, obviously we want to see what's going on and be able to see everything and give them the ability to see all of their files if they want in a web interface, but I really like the concept. Did you see my skill?
Yeah, about the master doc.
Yeah. And so my thought process with that was if we have these sandboxes and we do this, like instead of calling tools, we just have skills for things. And as long as we organize the file system in the way that that skill expects, it should be able to read and write all of the information and documents, right? Like, so
Yeah,
the more and more I think about this is like the file system. I'm also like, I'm thinking through like, if we more and more treating the record label system of record as a repo, like we had discussed, and then what is, because coding agents can traverse repos so easily, right? And so then the question becomes, at what point do we need, what data do we need a database versus where can we just put it in files? When it's like, you know, millions of lines of SQL because of royalties, like maybe that's when that stuff needs databases. But everything else, if we just keep it as a repo, and we build skills out that are really intuitive. So I guess my question with that, and I'll pull that up while I'm here just to get your opinion. I don't know how deep we went down it. But I'm really a fan of skill building right now. So I'm going down that path. Where is the skill? It's right here. So release management, the skill itself will get called by LLMs. Triggers when the user mentions artists, albums, EPs, singles, projects, asks about release planning, DSPs. So it's like the main knowledge base hub. I set it as like, this would be the folder. Like, so I imagine this skill gets, we have to talk through this, but I imagined the skill gets installed at the record label level or like the root org. And then there's like artist name, release name, and then release. Like, so like, that's how I set it up. We can change this easily. It's going to be all dependent on how you're thinking through building out that folder structure for each user or each org or whatever, each artist. And it also we got to think through it back to like security of like, and privacy of what things do we want people to be able to see not publicly, but like some row level security stuff on it, or in essence, that idea. Okay, and then it's going to, so like, let's say I took your idea of like, let's say from email, ideally from email, Alexis says, I want to, hey, Recoup, go through this thread and fill out a release for, the artist X or whatever. And it'll read the email thread and then go through the org, find if there is a release, check if there's a release exists. If no, create the release.md in the folder for that artist. If it does exist, create, update, or pull from that document. And then it just has like a bunch of like rules and stuff based from her document. And then if we go dive into the references, it's cool because it like, she said she wanted to be able to ask things like, write me a DSP pitch, write me a press one sheet. What's our physical production spec? So I like added the ability to like tell the LLM what are the expectations of all that. How do you do that, and where does that information live within the shit? And then what do the other reference? The release template, the full one is there, and then section guides is there, of just like kind of defining what the purpose is of each one. So that is the skill, and I guess the question then becomes, where do we install it, and how do we manage it to make sure it works? And even, is this the right framework for how you were thinking through sandboxes and stuff? Like, is it a skill? Is it a tool? Is it something else?
This seems great. Skills are very flexible. It's going to go right in the sandbox, and then as long as our coding agent references the skill, it'll do all that work and create and manage the docs. I think that sounds great. I am curious if we continue. It feels like the next evolution of our agents tab. The agents tab were custom skills that we wrote for how we were building out our LLM at the time, and these new skills they live inside of your sandbox, and they do a similar thing. The goal of the agent was a workflow that you do on a recurring basis at a button click. And now with the skill, it becomes more flexible of have the knowledge around what I'm doing and task.
I agree. And I also feel like there's going to be a point, the more I feel like this, is that where we move our MCP server to the sandbox, or they let the sandbox access our MCP server or our chat route. And then, or like you were saying, like, or make a CLI.
CLI, right.
And just instead replacing the front end chat route and all of our tools, like with like just always open a sandbox. Like why would we never not want to have a sandbox? You said streaming, right? Was the only thing, but
we could probably overcome that barrier.
Yeah, Manus always spins up a sandbox and also has streaming. So like they're a good reference for UI if we want to go on platform route. But again, going back to like we want to build habits. So the real key here is like, how do we not worry about UI as much and just make the magic where it's like the habit becomes any discussions on a release, Recoup is tagged as the email, and the user can then push and pull from the email itself. And then we just have to get really good at monitoring. And like you said, you can go back to like, I guess that's the big question. It's like monitoring. So like making sure it doesn't, if there is no way for it to show you what it's doing in the product, if there's no streaming and the user doesn't have eyeballs on if it updates the wrong file until it's too late. Like, and those are some of the hurdles, but until we hit them, I think we're on the right path. I'm excited about sandboxes. I think sandboxes and Pulse is going to be incredible, because I was reading through the Pulse. I'm sorry, the Claudebot architecture, and they have something called Heartbeats, which is very similar to our Pulse. and it's just like every 30 minutes it kicks off a thing automatically and pulls in like what it could do and then goes and does something for the user. And so like that, I see like the pulse similar like that, where like if we have the right sandbox, the right information, we can literally do things like, I know you have a release coming up in 2 weeks. I overnight looked at all the release information, analyzed the audience, and created this game for the rollout. Check it out. Let me know if you like those. That then it becomes very fucking magical for the user.
Which terminology do you find best for record labels, pulse or heartbeat?
I like pulse. Heartbeat is confusing to me until I read into it. Pulse.
Which is going to be easier to convey to Benji and Alexis, and for them to have it click of like, it triggers the agent and it does whatever the agent needs to do, and then it stops.
Yeah, exactly. Like the agent has a pulse, which means that it comes alive randomly and does work for you, and then delivers it to you without you asking.
Right.
And so then our moat becomes how we build the file system right and the orchestration layer right, so that it's reliable. And I think another moat is going to be security. And something that I wanted to ask about with that is like, I keep going back to these sub repos of like, what is GitHub's security? But then you would have to have everybody in an org give access to GitHub. So maybe that's not the right framing.
Well, GitHub, we would keep them all in our own. We would make them private, and they would stay inside of ours, so everybody would not have access to their GitHub repo. GitHub solves the problem I'm trying to face right now of how do we observe the file system. So maybe that is a path we go down. The biggest question mark I have in my head is scaling sandboxes as Git repositories. It looks like organizations can, asking Gemini, so I haven't dug too deep, it looks like organizations have a limit of 100,000 GitHub repos. So it's not something we would hit quickly, but spinning those up, we eventually hit a point, if this becomes really big, where we get over 100,000 repos, and then we come back to the question of, okay, do we spin up a new GitHub org? Do we delete file systems that aren't there? And so I've just been thinking right now, just keeping it in a sandbox is more ephemeral. They get destroyed after 7 days. So you and I have to set up a system so that as one's about to expire, we reopen it so that it stays without expiry. But that gets rid of that concern of spinning up too many, because they're all ephemeral and they don't actually live in GitHub. We can do unlimited, and because they expire automatically after 7 days, if an account expires or if we decide to not continue to reopen the sandbox, just let it die. And unlike a GitHub repo where we actually have to physically delete the GitHub repo to get an additional space of repos that we can use.
Or just, make a new one. That's not the end of the world to just spin up a new org.
Does it cost you to spin up an org though? Is that
I don't know, but I would bake it into the cost of the user, because it's their database, right? And so the value lies in like, you can export your data anytime you want, and it's like in a way that you will understand it. In a GitHub like we can just say, give me your GitHub log and I'll give you your like. So there's like a value to having that freedom from an org of like, oh, here's everything you've ever worked on. And it's all in the
should I go down the GitHub route then? I've been trying to avoid it and see how we can go with ephemeral, just sandboxes. But should I experiment with GitHub instead of trying to recreate the wheel to figure out what the state of the file system is?
Yeah, I mean,
give every account, if you have an account, if you have a snapshot, you also have a Git repository. And so then, like I was asking you, let me reshare. Instead of me updating this and saying a new column for file tree, like I was just saying, it would be, this extra column would be Git URL, or maybe it's account GitHub's, something like that. And then it's a link to the GitHub repository. And then when Sid opens up his sandbox tabs, he wants to see the file tree immediately. we look up the GitHub repo that Sid has. We query for the file tree using the GitHub API, which already exists. And then we instantly show you the file tree from GitHub, which is a much different lift than me trying to read it from the sandbox.
I like it. And I have a question for you in that scenario. If we do sub repos, then could you put the security layer on the mono repo and then have the less secure needed one on the sub repo, so that like we could high level put org financials, et cetera, whatever, but give the agent different permissions, like to like a different email address that it's using for different users. Like, how do we I know this is like a longer conversation and we're not there yet, but I guess that when we start doing, we'll actually, never mind. I'm sorry. We will tackle it when we need to tackle it. But yeah, it would spin up Git, and let's just think through like, what's the root layer of, is it the root layer per artist, or is it per record label, or is it per org? Right now, we don't have a record label account, so to speak. It's more org account than artist. So I'd probably just do it by org. But then again, if the root is the org, then is there any security permissions? Or do we have the org is the mono repo and inside is all of the artist repos? Questions. These are questions, but I like the idea of Git. It's not going anywhere.
No, it's been here since the start of the internet.
You're absolutely only going to get better at Git.
Yep.
Cool.
Anything else for today?
No, bro, you're on a roll. Go